All right, everyone, I'm going to bring things around full circle. A few months ago, I bought the BattleTech Aces Scouring Sands box set. Gave you my first impressions once I had a chance to open it up and read through the rules. I actually hadn't played it yet at that point. I have obviously played it a ton since then, and I feel like at this point I can give my final thoughts and a review of sorts, if you want to call it that. My plan is to split this up into multiple parts. This first video will be an overall product review because I think that's what most people are interested in. What do I think of the value, the components, the fun factor, how it works as a step up from the Alpha Strike box, because that's all that's required when you buy this box. Did it live up to my expectations? Those kind of things are what I'll cover in this video. The other parts will be where I get into more detail about what I think of the campaign and the Aces solo system. I feel like I have a lot of experience with those, the rules, the mechanics, how they play, and I can be a little more critical about them. And that doesn't necessarily mean negative, just that I can be more thoughtful about what I like and what I think they could improve for the next box, because there will be a next box. I think they're planning on one for this year. I know they're planning other ones, so there will definitely be more boxes. But I don't know how much everyone really cares about that sort of thing. Like, a lot of people might just say, I don't care, it's a campaign, I just want to play it. Okay, this is good enough, whatever. So I can spare them if they don't care about that. And hopefully that makes sense. All right, just for some background about me and my perspective coming into Aces, like why I decided to buy it and what I was expecting, that kind of thing. And if you don't care about any of this, just feel free to skip ahead and you can just hear what I have to say about the box. I'm sure that's what you came here for. But just for some background, I have been a classic BattleTech player since my high school friend introduced me to it in the mid-90s. I never really cared for Alpha Strike. I would play it occasionally with my kids because it was easier for them and they just weren't into the whole classic thing and all the detailed tracking. But overall, I just thought it was too abstracted, just missing too much of what makes classics so unique. But I did see this as an opportunity to be able to use my BattleTech stuff more. Even if it wasn't the game system I liked the most, I could play by myself, but not against myself. So if my kids didn't really feel like playing, I could use this as a way to play. And I get to use a campaign that I don't have to come up with. I am also a rules person. I like to learn rules for games. That might sound weird, but I do enjoy that. And I play a lot of solo games. So buying a box like this, knowing there's going to be a lot to read, a lot to understand, I have to figure out a new system, that is not daunting to me at all. That might not be the case for everyone, and I totally understand that. You may find learning rules for an Automa system very intimidating. And you might not have somebody that you know like me who's available to just take that all off your plate. Like I would say, sure, I'll learn all this and we'll just play it together, but I'll learn it all. In that case, your perspective on this could be different than mine. That's not to say that you won't enjoy it or that you shouldn't buy it. You just may feel a little more hesitancy about getting into something like this. So I mentioned I like to learn rules, and after I learn a game system, I am someone who likes to tinker with it. I'm sure you've figured that out if you've watched any of my other videos, but that can make me seem a little nitpicky at times. And I don't mean to come across as hypercritical or anything. I just like to play around with systems like this, and I try to break them. And I did definitely do a lot of that right after I got the box, and I made some tutorials. You know, normal people would just be like, awesome, a campaign, let's do it. You know, let's get the pretzels and the snacks out, let's go. And I'm like, a new solo system. All right, how do I find its flaws? And yeah, that's kind of dumb, but it's just how I am. And I freely admit it, I'm very self-aware. But luckily I did get that out of my system, and now I'm just having a good time playing through the campaign and recording it for those that are interested in watching. So that's a bit about who I am and how I approach buying this box. And let me just say that I do not feel any sort of obligation to cheerlead or defend anything, even if it's something I really enjoy. And even if it's something I already bought. I know a lot of people feel like they have to justify their purchase. I don't at all. Even though BattleTech is something I love, it's my favorite game of all time, it is not perfect, and neither are the products. Most of them are really great. I have been very impressed with almost everything they've put out over the past few years. That is, the things that I've bought. But I do not have an issue pointing out flaws when I see them. So if you are looking for overwhelming positivity about BattleTech Aces, which tends to be the norm from people on YouTube who are trying to get subscriptions and free stuff or whatever else, I would suggest checking out someone else's review. I am going to be honest, and literally this is just me trying to help people who like the same stuff as me. Enough of my blabbing, let's get to it. All right, let's talk about value, because that's really what a review boils down to. Is this worth the money that you're paying for it? So my first impressions, I said the box was an insane value, and absolutely nothing has changed in terms of my opinion. At $79, which is the retail price, something like that, it is worth every penny. Though I think you can get it for less. I did. I got this for $60 from Fortress Miniatures. And if you look on those online retailers that deal with a lot of BattleTech products, you can probably also find it for $60. But if you look at the components, I have a subset of all the components here. You're getting 9 miniatures, you're getting a full campaign system, you're getting a full solo system, you're getting tokens and other things that you can use, not just in this game, but in other games, like just a custom game that you're running. So value-wise, this is crazy. But let me tell you a little bit more about why I think it's so good. It really improves the Alpha Strike experience, in my opinion. And it does that through campaign play. I think this really brings in a narrative that is sometimes missing in Alpha Strike. Like classic BattleTech just kind of has that built-in narrative. Your units are going to have their own little story to tell in every mission because they're so sturdy and they just kind of slowly degrade, so you just get that automatically. Alpha Strike has a little trouble with that because most of the units are just a number of dots and a number of damage on a card, and you just don't get that same experience, but this fills that gap. You get a story, you get a reason to play these missions, you get different objectives, and it just really enhanced that for me. And I know I could do that without this book. I don't need this book to tell me how to run missions that have objectives or how to run a campaign. I can do that on my own, but this just makes it so easy. I don't have to do anything. I just read the book, set it up the way it says, and follow the rules. And I love that. This box also gives people like me a way to play solo without having to strategize against myself. That's what I normally do. I'll just play both forces. I don't really have a problem with that, but I like having this better. Whether it's a super competent opponent is up for debate, and I'll talk about that in another video, but it's available. It's a way for you to feel like you're playing against something else. And if you play cooperatively, which I haven't had a ton of time to do yet. My kids played a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked yet. But then it gives a common opponent and you guys work together to take on that opponent instead of someone having to be the bad guy. And that's a lot of fun. It introduces players to combined arms, vehicles, infantry, emplacements, and indirect fire, which I was kind of surprised is not in the quick start rules. That introduces a new type of strategy to the game, which is really cool. And it does that in just a few pages of rules. You don't have to buy the Alpha Strike Commander's Edition, which is this monster book with tons of rules in it. They're all right in here, and they're all on this reference sheet. The campaign book includes unique mission ideas for less creative people like me, and the waypoint system, which maybe some people have done this before, but I've never seen something like that, and I loved it. I thought it was such a cool way to introduce some randomness to the mission. It's not just, hey, you got to go destroy this base. It's, hey, you got to destroy this base, and by the way, as you get closer to it, or as the turns go by, these waypoints are going to get revealed and some random stuff is going to happen. That was really cool, and you could use these in your own games to do that same type of thing. One of the coolest things that they did with the waypoints was minefields in the second mission. This is just one of the first missions you can play. It's not like it's a spoiler. But you could lay mines down that were waypoints, and the enemy had to come in at certain points on the map, and that would trigger a minefield. And I thought, you know, that's one of the things you really can't do in solo play, but they figured out a way to do it, and I thought that was awesome. And the new components. I mean, you get these miniatures, which everyone loves more miniatures. You get tokens to take the place of certain things if you're doing bigger missions where maybe you just don't have enough miniatures, especially for things like turrets. Like I have a couple, but if you're going to have 4 or 5 turret emplacements in a mission, I don't have enough for that. So you got these to take place for those. You got more terrain. You get hills, you get rivers, you get a bridge, more terrain. If you're not a person who wants to collect lots of expensive 3D terrain, this just gives you more stuff to use. You got trees, buildings, hills, a bridge, and rivers now to make a cool map. And you can use them for anything. Like I said, it doesn't have to be with this campaign. The campaign makes great use of them, but you can put them to use however you want. And it's nice to just have another option. For me, I have 3D terrain, but I like having this as another option, and I'll mention that again in just a minute. So I think those 5 things really make this a great value for me. And again, that might be the bottom line for a lot of people. I definitely think it's worth the money. So how about the components? Let's start with the miniatures. So these are mostly unique models. I mean, I think the Rifleman, which I forgot to put the 2 little flaps on it, I just didn't feel like doing it. But for the most part, I think almost all of these models, maybe the Rifleman and the Howler are fairly similar to the other ones they've had, and the Summer too, I guess. But I think the majority of these are unique models, or they're at least different variants. And so that's always awesome. It's great to have more miniatures. And what's really great about these, of course, is that, I don't even know if I can fit that on the bridge. These are the OPFOR in the campaign. So you have everything you need in terms of the units you're fighting against between the miniatures and the tokens for the entire campaign. You never have to go digging into your own sets and find the things that'll match what they have. That's all you need. It's all in the box, and that's awesome. I've seen a couple people comment about the quality of the miniatures, and they were saying they're not quite up to the normal standard, but I didn't notice any issues. They all looked pretty normal to me. I think someone pointed out like the little triangle here on the Summoner, but honestly, I had no issue with these at all. They look fine. They painted fine. No issue from my end, but just something to be aware of. I did see someone mention that. How about the cardstock terrain? So, like I said, I have my own 3D terrain. I don't necessarily need this stuff, but of course the campaign uses it. And I mentioned this in another video that it is a lot easier just to use this because it matches exactly what they have. So if you're playing through the campaign the first time, I would probably recommend just sticking with what they have. Unless you have stuff that's really cool and matches what they do, then go for it. And I mentioned, I think the 6 Sides of Gaming videos, the Friday Night Aces, they do have terrain that fits this perfectly. So if you got that, great. But the cardstock terrain is really nice to have. I mean, you're not going to win any awards for your terrain, but it's simple. It packs flat, which is really nice. You can just put it all into one box, and that's all you need to carry. It's great for new players. So people who don't have 3D terrain, it's awesome to have all of this. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. I mean, to be honest with you, if you're looking at some of these, like I can't really get them to stay closed anymore, these flaps. Like they all are kind of bending out. I know that I can like crease the sides and like try to really get them to stay, but I found that they're not super sturdy. And I have packed and unpacked them quite a bit as I've been playing through the campaign, because sometimes you need hills, sometimes you need buildings. So I don't know that they'll stand the test of time, but they're decent enough. I mean, you can get the job done. I would say these smaller ones probably hang in there the best, but you can even still see with these, they don't quite stay together like the buildings do. The buildings have the advantage of you put them together and then the big flap comes on the top to hold it all. So those definitely seem like they'll hold up better. But, you know, again, these are fine. The rivers are good. They're like heavier cardstock. They're almost like stiff cardboard. I will say, though, that the teeth for like the puzzle pieces on the end to put them together, it's a real tight fit. I mean, it is like super snug. I sometimes feel like I'm going to break them when I do that. I have a piece where like part of it's kind of flipping up. Let me see if I have it. So like this one here, you can see like these are kind of flipping up. It's just, these are so tight. And so I almost feel like I have to kind of wiggle them like this to get them disconnected. And sometimes it just catches that and it pulls it up. So I feel like most of them will stand the test of time on these rivers. The teeth though, they might be a little iffy with those. You also get end pieces for these too. So if you don't have like a complete river going from end to end, you have flat pieces that go on the end of them to make like a nice clean finish. And then you also have kind of like a, I don't know, kind of more of a rounded end. So if you wanted like a starting point that's not the edge of the map, you could do it that way. The bridge is cool, also very heavy cardstock. I will say that this is even tighter than the rivers. So like let me take these off of here and show you. But when you put this together, these little tabs are fitting into these slots on the side bridge pieces, and they are tight. There's one part, yeah, right here, where I can't quite get it to go, but I feel like if I force it, it's either gonna break this part off, which goes up and down, or it's gonna break the tab. So this thing's gonna stay like this permanently. I'm not gonna disassemble this again. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like I said, it's not meant to be the greatest terrain ever, but it is nice. It fits everything in the campaign, just like the miniatures. So I think it's good enough for the price you're paying for the box. I already mentioned with the tokens, these are great. Again, if you want to do a bigger mission where you just don't have 20 different things of elementals or infantry, They even have them for the APCs here. You might not have 3 just generic APC miniatures, so it's nice to have these. I mean, I think most people are going to prefer to have miniatures, but when you're doing a campaign where you might get a lot of forces on the board, it's nice to just have these, especially for things like turrets where, I don't know, do you have to have miniature turrets? I have a couple, but I think it's fine to use tokens for that kind of stuff. All right, and then you get, of course, the rulebook and the quick reference sheet. And the rules are very nice overall. I said in my first impressions, they're laid out nicely. They go piece by piece, which I like. They kind of just introduce the concepts one at a time. I do like that. It uses the new layout and format that's pretty common for BattleTech stuff these days. It looks nice. There's lots of examples in this book, so the examples really pop. They have this nice bordering, and it definitely looks separate from the rest of the text. And there are a ton of examples in here and in the campaign book, which I really appreciated. With that said, I feel like there were some things in here that were too vague. So I think they could make some of the rules a little more clear and be less reliant on examples. So for things like overheating, I already made a video about this, but the second option on overheat, where it says, if the target number is this and overheating might let the unit hit the target structure, use whatever overheat. And I felt like that instruction was not exactly clear on whether you use it anytime you hit structure or just when the overheat lets you hit structure. And it's not answered in the rulebook. The rulebook just says, look at the cards. I felt like they could have cleared that up. There is an example in the campaign book that solves it. It tells you exactly what the answer is to that, which is you use it anytime you hit structure, but you had to really read through that example and pay very close attention to understand that. Movement objectives and force withdrawal special orders are kind of similar. They're not 100% clear sometimes. It'll say sometimes like this, like get closer to the escape edge. I mean, this is the fleeing one, but it'll have an instruction that says get closer to the escape edge. But sometimes you wonder like, well, do they use their full movement because they're really trying to get toward that? They're trying to get toward a movement objective. They're trying to get off the map. It's not clear. Or if you just mix that in with the normal movement instructions, and if they just kind of get stuck where they are because yeah, they're getting a ½ inch closer or an inch closer, but they're following everything else. Is that okay? It's not very clear. And the example they give in the rulebook is super basic, and it doesn't answer that question. Also with the eyes, I mean, I know maybe I make a bigger deal out of this than other people, but these little eye symbols here, they do call out the one that has the crosshairs in it. That means the unit needs to be able to target that when it's done moving. But they don't do that for just the eye or the eye that has a line through it. Does that mean they need to have line of sight now or when they're done moving? Do they need to not have line of sight now or when they're done moving? I just feel like stuff like that could have been more clear in the rulebook. And again, a lot of people are just trying to have fun with this. They just want to get into playing the campaign. And that's why I think it's even more important to have rules that are really clear and specific about what you need to do so people don't have to dig through the rulebook and look things up. They just get to the playing and keep it real simple. All right, how about the ACES system? You're getting the deck of ACES cards. This is about half of it. I think there's 11 or 12 different roles that you get these cards for. So they have a front and a back, a movement side and a combat side. Somebody mentioned that they thought these cards looked flimsy. Somebody made this comment. They're like, wow, that card looks like junk. I mean, they're just standard cards as far as I know. I don't know what they were talking about. Like, yeah, they're not like stiff cards or anything, but I mean, they're just cards like any other board game I've ever played. I don't know. You're not going to get like super duper premium in this. It's a $60 to $80 box. Like, you get 2 commander decks that are going to have specific instructions or priorities that the units on the ACES side are going to look for. You get these tokens to mark units as first or last, depending on the command card. And you get a set of special order cards that will introduce unique things to the mission. Are they moving towards something? Are they trying to destroy something? Are they using indirect attacks? Are they trying to get off the map? So you get all of that with this system. You also get these tokens that match up with the special orders. So the white side is the movement objective and the black side is the destroy objective. So this allows you to mark things on your terrain for those special orders. I think it does a good job, the ACES system overall, of being good enough. It's a good enough opposition force for solo or cooperative play. I don't necessarily think it's really good or really great. Like it's going to really challenge the players and make them feel like, whoa, I got to get way better to beat this thing. And I feel like players like me who really like to tinker with stuff are going to eventually figure out how to exploit it. But I think it will suffice for 99% of people. I think it does a good enough job. Again, the goal is to get you playing solo or cooperatively, not necessarily to be the greatest opponent of all time. I think that would be my take on it. And I'm going to have a separate review, like I mentioned, where I'll talk more detail about this overall, why I have the pros and the cons that I do, and just how they could improve this, I think, for the next boxes, in my opinion. Now, I know they've talked a lot about how much this was play tested, and I give them a lot of credit for that. I hate when you release stuff, especially like this, that's going to be real sensitive to not working. That's great that it was play tested. That doesn't mean it's perfect. There are always ways to improve, and I think they have some ways to do that here. So if I'm being honest, I would say for me, this ended up being maybe the thing that I expected to be my favorite thing, but it wasn't. It didn't really meet where I was hoping in the end, just because I did find it was a little wonky sometimes. But it gives you the ability to play solo, and that's super important to me, so it still has a lot of value, just maybe not quite as much as I originally thought it would. All right, as part of this, you're also getting the cards for the Aces units, and there's a lot of cards in here, the Alpha Strike cards for the units. You have all the mechs, the vehicles that are in here, you have the emplacements, you have infantry, you have elementals. All the cards you need to run it are in here. Onto the campaign system. That covers a lot of things here. We've got the story and mission book. That's this right here. This is my favorite thing in the box. I love this thing. It is amazing. We got the campaign logs, which are in the book as my bookmarks for the campaign. But you have your campaign log, your force roster, and then you have another sheet where you track your income and expenses at the end of each mission. Those are nice. They finally made them printable. They weren't when I first got the box, but now I can print as many of these as I want, which I expected them to do. I was surprised they weren't there right away, because you only get, I think, one of each, or maybe you get 2 expense sheets, but only 1 force roster. So anyway, that problem solved. You can go get those now. You get the waypoints, and you get the edge tokens, the name pilot cards, and the edge ability cards. That's all included in the campaign system. So as I mentioned before, I think this is part of what makes this such a great value, because it gives players a fun way to experience a campaign without having to do anything really except follow the instructions. Set up the terrain, read through the rules, pick your force, set up the enemy force, and get to it. You don't have to come up with anything. You don't need a game master. Nobody has to be the bad guy. Just get to it and play the missions. And the missions were really fun. I mean, not all of them. There were some that I thought were kind of whatever, but for the most part, they were all fun. They were all fairly unique. They introduced new concepts. I really have very little negative to say about this. I have a couple things I'll talk about in my separate video about the campaign. Overall, I think this is really great. And people can get ideas from this. They can use those missions for their own custom games they want to play. Again, you could just pull it out and say, hey, let's do the one where we're trying to get into the base and review all the waypoints, or let's do the one where we have to get more size than they have in this one specific area. Or let's do one where there's multiple ways to win. You destroy this one mech, or you get APCs off the map, or you take out everybody but the commander, or something like that. You know, you can get those ideas from the book and play them as one-off games, which is really cool. I mentioned the waypoint system can be used for that as well. You could use these to make some randomness in your own missions. And I thought the name pilot and edge system was actually pretty cool. I am, unfortunately, as much as I like to learn rules and enforce rules, for some reason I had a hard time remembering to use this stuff all the time. But I really like it. It's kind of RPG light. You don't have to make these big character sheets or character cards or anything. You just get simple ones. They have a skill, they have a number of edge tokens and a number of edge abilities. You can use your edge tokens to make something hit that just missed. You can re-roll a critical, re-roll a motive hit. I was real lucky with the re-roll criticals, huh? But you can re-roll motive hits, or you can spend them to use your edge abilities. And the edge abilities are fairly mild, I will say. At first I thought, oh, these are great. But then when I reread them and read them very carefully, I'm like, okay. I mean, it's cool, but it's not like a super powerful thing. It's usually like there's some stipulations, which I think is fine. It shouldn't be something that the players can use to abuse the automa. But they were fun. I mean, and especially ones that you could synergize. Like I had Steve, my name pilot, that had the forward observer that eliminated the indirect fire penalty. And then I had Shockwave, my LRM carrier pilot, who had the patient ability. So he would stand still and then he could re-roll his attacks if he didn't like what he got. He had to re-roll everything. But those worked well together because one could eliminate the indirect fire penalty for themselves and for the indirect fire unit, and then that unit could re-roll. So if they didn't get a good roll, they could take advantage of a lower number and then try to re-roll that. So I thought all that was really great. So that's my take on the components. I think overall, very few complaints. I think the terrain may not hold the test of time. I think the rules could use some cleanup. But other than that, the components you're getting in this box are great, well worth the money. All right, and how about this box being a step up to people who just have the Alpha Strike box? And Catalyst and Lynn Vander, I think, have both commented that that's what this is supposed to be. This is the new step up for players who just have Alpha Strike and they want to get into a little bit more. So this will be an alternative to the Commander's Edition rulebook, which introduces basically every rule and option that Alpha Strike has to offer. So this gives them a way to get into a little bit more without having to go full blown into every crazy rule. And I think overall, this does a really nice job of this. And it does it again because it's getting players into campaign play, which I feel like is the good next step. It's fun to have little death matches with your Alpha Strike box, or maybe some minor objectives that you play through. But having a campaign system that's pretty light and simple to go through is, I think, the best way to get them into that, because they can play some missions, they don't have to learn a lot about setting up a campaign, and they get that taste of, okay, the decisions I make matter. I can't just throw all my mechs out to get blown up. I have to consider, do I want to risk losing this unit? Do I want to pay for the repairs? I think that's a great way to get people totally hooked on this game, and BattleTech in general. And I think it's great that they introduced some new rules, especially for vehicles and infantry, which are a really common thing, I think, that people want to add to their game once they get used to mech combat. And they were able to do it in such a simple way. It's just a few pages. The rules are fairly light. I mean, the most difficult thing in there is probably stuff like anti-mech attacks or transporting infantry. That's probably about the hardest thing that's in there, and even those rules aren't that bad. So I think that was a nice way of introducing some of the most common rules that people are looking for once they get used to mech-on-mech combat. They gave you this awesome reference sheet. This is probably my second favorite thing in the box, because I love having this and not needing to look this stuff up anymore. Just having all of this right at the table next to me. I reference this a lot. If you watch my campaign videos, you can see me actually do that during the game. And I think the Commander's Edition is going to overwhelm most people, so I feel like this is a nicer way to get them into a few more rules. And I suspect the other Aces boxes will continue to do that. They'll probably have a little bit more to introduce in each one of those. That would be my guess. I do wish, on this note, I do wish that Catalyst would have a combined arms box for people who have a game of Armored Combat box or the Alpha Strike box, and they just want to try units that aren't mechs. They don't necessarily want to get into a campaign or play a solo system. They want to play with their buddy. They just want to have vehicles and VTOLs and infantry and just the rules for those. That's what they want. And the problem here is that Aces only includes 2 vehicles, the Fulcrums, and they're the same vehicle. That's it. So even though you get these rules and you get 2 vehicles, and you do get the tokens, yes, for other things, but if you want to use miniatures, that's all you're going to get. So it's not a lot of variety. So it would be cool if there was a box with like 6 different vehicles, a couple of VTOLs, some infantry tokens, I guess, if Catalyst doesn't want to get into making miniatures for those, and then just the basic rules for both Classic, and I'm not talking BS, and you know what that means, Battlefield Support. I mean the rules for Classic for vehicles, VTOLs, and infantry, and then also the rules for Alpha Strike for vehicles, VTOLs, and infantry. And that would be perfect. If they had a box like that for $35 to $40, I think that would be awesome for people. But they could also do this and just get them into a higher price point for kind of the same thing. But I do feel like people who want to continue and use these rules, if they don't have vehicles yet, they're going to have to go buy another box, and then that's another $50 or whatever those go for now. I do think the Mercenaries box should have done what I just said. It should be that box. They gave you vehicles, they gave you infantry tokens, they gave you, well, they didn't give you VTOLs, but you could buy a box that had VTOLs in it. And that box could have accomplished this step up, but it didn't. Classic is without that step up box. I guess you could say Clan Invasion is sort of like that, and I guess Mercenaries is sort of like that. But again, Mercenaries is a whole separate set of rules for Battlefield Support, so it's not quite what I'm talking about. So I'd love to see that. I don't know if it'll ever happen. It might not be worth at that price point to them. All right, so summing up my overall review, I think it's a great product. I'm really glad I bought it. I would absolutely buy it again, knowing what I know now. Going back to my perspective as a Classic player who didn't really like Alpha Strike, this got me to play Alpha Strike way more than I ever have. You know, I really would only play it with my kids. So this was able to get me to play Alpha Strike, and that's what they want, right? I mean, they want you to play more and have fun. I'm most satisfied with the campaign book, just having this whole system ready and available, and I can just follow the instructions and set it up, and I don't have to do a lot of coming up with a story and coming up with a reason for this battle and what we're gonna do. And I could just do this. That was great. I love that. Obviously, I like everything else in the box too. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything here I don't like. It's just these two things are like these are the things I've gone back to the most as things I really, really like. I will say this did not engage my kids yet. I did mention that in my first impressions that I was concerned with the amount of time it was going to take to run the ACES system and whether my kids were going to get really into it. And unfortunately, that came to pass. It's just too much setup. It takes too long to get these missions set up for them. And there's just too much time in between their turns because Dad has to run the ACES. And, we're all playing a few units, but not that many. So they just feel like it takes forever to get back to them. And I've gotten much better, of course, at using the ACES cards, and I can move these units pretty quickly, but it still just feels like for that environment, it's probably better for me to just do the bad guys and just let them attack me. Then I don't have to worry about this and referencing this and looking at these, and it just simplifies things. So with that said, I'm absolutely looking forward to the next box. I absolutely will get it. I love this. I like Alpha Strike a lot more. I appreciate it more now. And so I definitely will be getting the next box, and maybe I'll be making a tutorial for that. Maybe I'll make campaign videos for that. I don't know. I hope that, my perspective on this helps because I've just played with it so much, especially, like I said, for people who don't have it or just trying to kind of weigh how they're feeling about things. Maybe this helps to talk things out a little bit. Let me know what you think. What do you think about the box? I mean, if you've watched some of my videos, what do you think just seeing me play or, seeing the rules in general? I love hearing your thoughts. You guys really open my mind because I just have kind of my own narrow perspective on things. So I like hearing what others have to say, especially from people who love Alpha Strike and don't care about Classic at all. What do you think about this? I would imagine you love it even more than I do because it's it's really for you specifically. So yeah, let me know what you think. Like I said, I'll have a couple other videos coming where I really dig into the ACES system and the campaign for those that are interested. So keep on the lookout for those, and thanks for watching.